Max Gorlin, Melbourne Football Club. You're listening to the Coaches Panel.
This is Nat Fyfe from the Fremantle Footy Club.
Trent Cotchin from the Richmond Footy Club.
Scott Pendlebury from the Collingwood Football Club. You're listening to the Coaches Panel.
Patrick Cooch from the Carlton Footy Club.
It's Rory Sloane here from the Adelaide Crows.
This is Tom Mitchell from the Hawthorn Footy Club, and you're listening to the Coaches Panel.
Oh, you know it's the start of a brand new year when we get into the 50 most relevant. Hello, friends. It's MJ from the Coaches Panel, and we are back counting you down through who we believe are the most relevant players for SuperCoach Dream Team and AFL Fantasy for the 2022 pre-season. We'll talk about the 50 most relevant and the concept in just a second if you're new to it. But joining me on this episode, as you'll hear from him a fair bit throughout the preseason, I've got Kane. Hello, mate. Happy New Year. Nice to see you.
Likewise, MJ. Yeah, super exciting. I feel like this is when things just always pick up a gear. We've got prices now. We've got positions. We've got all the information we really need to start putting our team pretty much together. Obviously, the preseason is those final touches and we get that rookie news. But at this point in the season, what I love about the 50 is you start throwing ideas around and combinations spit off that, and we can just track those little things as we move through the preseason. Do we want to hear about Roll? Do we need to get an update on an injured player? So when you get into this time of year, again, it just feels like footy's really, really close all of a sudden.
Yeah, it's not that far away. A little bit over 8 weeks until we hit really the final days before the preseason commences. So you're right, it does get underway. If you're new to the Coaches Panel or you're new to the 50 most relevant, the way it works is simply this. It's not just a mix and match of random player names thrown out there for you to consider. Rather, it's ranking and rating players who I believe are the most relevant players. We take in things like a player's position. We take in their ability and their frequency of scoring. We take in the value price point. We take in their fixture. We take in the positional scarcity, potentially. We put all of the formats into the melting pot too. So it's not just one format only. It's SuperCoach Dream Team and AFL Fantasy. So you will see players that if you only play one of the formats and go, oh, too high, too low. It's about making it for really the super fans of fantasy footy, which really are the Coaches Panel fanatics, going, okay, this is who I believe. And it's about starting the conversation. That's what the preseason really should be all about, is opening your minds to the possibility of what might happen. What are the variables that could happen throughout the preseason and right throughout the 2022 season at large? But let's kick it off. You've seen it by the title already. Number 50 to kick it off is Reilly O'Brien, the Adelaide Crows ruckman. He's 26 years of age, and last year was a down season based on what he has historically delivered for us, but there was still some really nice scores for us. Last year, his top score in AFL Fantasy and Dream Team was a 135 against North Melbourne, while it was a 147 against the Tigers in SuperCoach. Neither of those, though, are career high scores. They came back in 2019 against the Tigers when, to be fair, they really didn't have a ruckman in that game, so to speak, but he still delivered a 146 in Dream Team and Fantasy and a 181 in SuperCoach. Last year, an 86 average is what he delivered in AFL Fantasy and Dream Team, and a 95 in SuperCoach. In that format, he's going to set you back just over 520,000 this year in SuperCoach, 723,000 in AFL Fantasy, and 735,000 in DT. And it was a really interesting year, Kane, when you look into the depth and the details and how Rob went about building his year. He was a popular player to start the year. There were many that were hot on him being the next R2 and probably rivaling potentially even Brodie Grundy, some might have thought, in the preseason as the number one ruck. But if you started Rob or you traded into Rob at various points in the season, you probably found yourself a little bit frustrated with how the season went down.
Yeah, I think especially off the bar that he established, MJ, because when you think about a guy like Rob, this is a guy that, you go back to 2019, we had him as a rookie. We had him as a guy on our bench who ended up becoming not only a great cash cow, but a genuine player that you wanted at the end of the season on your field.
Yeah.
And who was matching the big boys, so much so that people were trading out the big boys, playing Rob and getting another premium on in another line. That was sort of how he burst onto the scene. So when you're going at a 95 in that first season, you then jump up to an adjusted 108 off the COVID scoring. And he showed that ceiling. And we always talk about score build. He had a really well-rounded, like he was almost a 20 touch, 5 mark, 5 tackle kind of guy with 35 plus hit outs in the shortened format. That's pretty impressive stuff. So expectations were high. I think people thought he could jump up 110 plus. We know there wasn't going to be any ruck sharing. That wasn't a thing that Adelaide brings. So there was all these signs that everyone thought, like, he feels almost safer. There wasn't a Luke Jackson. There wasn't, a Cameron. There wasn't a Cox. All this sort of things that maybe people were anxious about with Grundy and Gawn. And people thought, this is the guy. This is the next guy I want to get on. And unfortunately, straight out of the gates, you had a decision to make, didn't you, MJ? When you start the season with basically 100 points combined across the first 2 games.
Yeah.
Especially in these salary cap formats that are, the price movement is after your third. It had a lot of people in a bit of a bind about what they do. And, in the short term after that, he did produce a next good month and show some signs. But then there was a dip straight after that. So it was a season of ups and downs. We've known since that there was a back injury that was limiting, was restricting him. And we know that, Adelaide weren't a side that was challenging for the 8. So there wasn't maybe some of that freedom that, some of those other bigger rucks get in terms of, chasing the ball and things like that. It's very, very much, it's hard when you're in a bottom side, really, isn't it? It's always going to be one of those ones you've got to, as well as he did it in 2020, it does get harder to repeat and produce those big scores. So to get him at 86, though, in DT and get him at 95, there's scope there, MJ. There's proven scope that he can go, anywhere upwards of 10 to 20 points above what he's priced. And I think the thing with Rob is, where are we at with the other rucks? If you look at Gawn, that's probably the simplest one. You can make the case. We all saw the grand final. We all saw what Luke Jackson did. This is a guy that's entering his 3rd season. You barely even see rucks taking the field, let alone having an impact. And turning a grand final. So we have to believe that that's something that's going to keep going up, that ruck share between Gawn and Jackson. And at Gawn's age and at the price you're paying, are you really going to get anything more than what you paid for? Does he regress down to 100 in DT, 110? And when that comes down, all of a sudden you think, well, Rob can get pretty close to that. And he's 20 points, cheaper in price. And again, you look at a Grundy, look at his last 3 seasons and dates, 122 in 19, 114 adjusted in 20, and then a 106. So if you like trends, it's not looking particularly nice for Grundy. Again, now there's some things built in there. There was an injury. There's a few other things. But if you just look at it from a numbers point of view, again, then you go the Darling and Sean Darcy last year. As good as his season was, and there were some injuries in there as well, not so much missing games.
But in game
once he came in, but that was only a 94. And people are ranting and raving about how good he was in the DT format. Now we know SuperCoach, he was
a beast.
Incredible. He was a beast. But in DT, and that's really the crew. That's really the crew he's up against.
It's not a scary crew, is it? And we'll talk about those options in a sec, because you put up what he did in this quote unquote down year, and it is a down year. It's not horrific under that premise of, what do you believe is going to happen in this ruck division in 2022? Last year, he delivered 5 AFL Fantasy tons and Dream Team tons in 2021, which included a 135, a 129, and a 111. Additionally, a further 5 scores, 80 to 97. So if 50% of your scores are 90 plus in a bad year in Dream Team and Fantasy, look, that's a positive sign. Because I don't ever like removing games, and we're not talking about removing games, but if you look at the first 10 games of the year, it was a putrid average of 77.8. However, in the final 10 games, he averaged in Dream Team and Fantasy, we'll talk about SuperCoach in a second, he averaged 94 and had only 2 scores below 87 in this stretch. So even without making too much manipulation, there's that 10 points of value just in that season alone right there in SuperCoach. He averaged 96 in this poor year, but still 9 tons, including 4 133 or higher, an additional 3 scores between 90 and 99. And like in the AFL Fantasy, you look at the year in that 10 round splits. First 10, he averaged 85. But over the final 10, he averaged 105. And he actually outperformed Brodie Grundy in SuperCoach over that final 10-game stretch. Yes, there's a Brodie Grundy injury-affected game in there, but still, that's what happened through that final stretch of games. And then you alluded to that really impressive 2019 and 2020 seasons where he was the best cash cow in the back half of 2019, while in 2020 in AFL Fantasy, he ranked 10th for total points and 17th for averages for the year. While in SuperCoach, he was the 20th best ranked performer across the season for averages and total points. So he's just 12 months removed from being a top 20 player. And now, as you've so really well put, we've got some value. And it's not just the value in a line that we've got question marks. It's also in a line that provides us opportunities, because what we do have, Kane, and I'm keen on your take on this, is depending on the format you play, we've got some really expensive top tier mids. Like you've got the trinity of midfielders in McRae, Steele, and Miller. You could probably even throw Mitchell if you really wanted to, who had a stunning back end of the year. And then you've got these incredible forwards that Champion Data have gifted us in Mitch Duncan, Tim Taranto, probably more relevant in Dream Team and AFL Fantasy, but definitely SuperCoach relevant too. You've got a Josh Dunkley that's going to divide people. You've got a value of Cornelio. All of a sudden, you can find yourself spending big, big dollars in these other lines. And the value of Rob, the positional question marks of scoring, you put those together, and now all of a sudden, Rob looks like a candidate to go, you know what? I will start with you, Reilly O'Brien.
Yeah, well, again, he could easily get close enough, MJ. I think that's almost the term I think of for O'Brien, is in years past, 95 hasn't been enough. You're leaking anywhere between 15 and 25 points to that 1-2 combo of Gawn and Grundy. Like that's too much, even across the first half of the season, you're down 150, 250 points. But as I said, if that bar comes down, and it might come down just because the way the game is played. Like we did see it, that, especially early in the season, how hard was it for Rucks to score?
Incredible.
It wasn't. Now, we know that, footy starts out in the summer months, the weather's usually better, the ball movement's a bit quicker.
Yep.
And then you get fast forward to the winter, everyone's tired, everyone's banged up, you've played 16 games. The game does slow down. There is more stoppages. So it's no surprise that often the Rucks do build into the back half of the season. But as I said, if the bar is coming down, if the bar is, 100 is where these top two are, and he's getting 95.
Yeah.
And you look at the prices those guys are currently at, you probably are, it's probably a better spend. Now we're talking 5 points. That's 100. That's only 100-point difference. Does that allow you to get that extra 150 that you make up that 100 with having
in another line,
better mid price than another rookie, a better premium than a mid price, so all that sort of stuff that flies off all these things. It's never just a 1-for-1 combination. And again, you don't have the durability issues of a Darcy.
No,
you don't have the competition and sharing issues of a Gawn.
No,
you don't have the new coach issues for what could
Grundy.
Be for Grundy.
Yeah.
So when you start thinking about what feels safe, you start thinking, well, this guy has the most knowns of anyone. He's got the same coach.
Yep.
He's played under him for 2 years.
Yep.
He's had a career best year, albeit he's only played at the level for a short period of time, but he's shown that the best is very much good enough.
Yeah, it's in the ballpark.
It's, 108 is, if you're doing that, you're really, really in the mix. And again, we've got a reason that there was a back injury that was in the season. And as you spoke about, in the back half, we got back to the 95. We got back to that sort of average. So you go, okay, did he just have to work through that? Did he need the buy? Did they need to get some training into it? Like, it's trending the right way. So when I think about this guy, and maybe his place is best served in AFL fantasy.
Yeah, probably.
Where 100K here, 50K there, all of a sudden can make a big difference. And when you can really target, stretch. Maybe you say, just want to see Grundy in that McRae system. I just want to see Gawn and Jackson, how that splits works out. And at their price, they're not really going to burn you. Maybe they're 10 points over their price. But again, you're probably getting the same 10 points with Rob. So I think that's where his home is. Obviously, he's got pressure in terms of selection on our sides by the guys cheaper, because we've got a lot of stuff and a lot of options cheaper. We've got Bruce, we've got Lynch. If he was to win that Hawthorn job and they were to say, McAvoy, you go down back, there's a path for a few of these guys to be really, really relevant at a really cheap price.
Yes.
And the preseason will determine that. But that's where I think the squeeze does come in people's minds for Rob. If they've got one of Grundy and Gawn, whoever they believe is the best ruck, and they want this basement option, it does get hard to fit him in. But I think with all the information we've currently got, close enough is what Rob could be. And again, how many times do we get close to the, having to lock in our sides and we go, had a basement rookie and now I need to go up to that sort of first round draftee range where it's just 50, 60, 70K.
Yeah.
Just to get everything right. I think that's one where people might go, no, you can get close enough. I need this rookie. I need this mid-pricer. So I think he might be a name that as we get closer to the season starts getting some attention, because I've said he's got the knowns. He doesn't have the unknowns that these other players have. Yeah,
if he can get near everyone else, and it only has to be for a shortened period of time. Doesn't have to be till his buy in round 13. It can just be that opening 6 to 8 weeks. If he can get near enough, that's exactly all you need. He'll provide you value. He'll provide you scoring. And then the best case scenario is he delivers enough to hold for the year. The fact he's around 13 buy when Darcy, Grundy and Gawn are all missing in round 14, that provides another scenario for you if you really like a couple of midfielders or forwards and your structure goes, oh man, I'm going to get burnt in that week. And you go, look, O'Brien helps me enough and he gets you near enough. Then that's a massive edge. Like, it's huge. You think about, and we have it every year, you get to that round 14 buy and you got dramas. Like, it just seems to be the case every time. You've got stuff that pops up, the player that just had the round 13 buy, they go, you know what, give him another week to freshen up. Yeah. Like, it's often carnage. Often we get through the round 12 easy. Yeah, round 13 a bit harder, and then 14's the plan. To not have two rucks, because that's what we've had in previous years. We've had to have those guys. We've had to have Gawn and Grundy. They're so good, but they put so much pressure on the rest of your team, because especially by that point, it's very rare to have a playing R3. Or to have a forward that you can swing in there. So now all of a sudden, the maximum you can field is 20. Yeah. And that's a lot of pressure on your side. So to have this guy that isn't in that buy, helpful. Again, you might look at your balance and go, well, that 100 points, I think he might be behind these guys across the course of the season. By then. It might, for your balance, go, but I've got another 100-point player in the buys. That might have been a zero. So that's a big edge when you think about team building, when you've got, as you said, Gawn, Grundy, and Darcy, plus the guy that's just always reliable and Goldstein on there as well if there was injuries. Yeah. To have a point of difference guy that is in that buy round. And he plays the Gold Coast Suns too. So it's not the easiest matchup there, but it's certainly not the most challenging matchup either. So I think those are the key things. An ACL that MJ could be anything. He might not play at all. Yeah, he could be rucking how he's going to recover from that. Yeah, exactly. Like, you look at the realities of, and this is why I think Reilly O'Brien's a perfect candidate to kick off the 50 most relevant, because it's all about what are the possibilities. The possibilities are not unfounded in he might get to. No, he's shown even last year He's a 95 ability over a long stretch of time guy in AFL Fantasy and Dream Team, and a 105 guy in SuperCoach. This echoes the sentiment of what he's done in 2019 and 2020. So we actually have, based on a data trend and split, he is closer to being a 95 Dream Team and AFL Fantasy ruck than he is what he's priced at. He's also closer to being 105 ruck in SuperCoach than what he's actually priced at. As you said, if he can get close enough to the big boys. Now, whether that be because of his scoring drastically bumping or the regression of the groups of candidates, you get those combinations combined along with a flexible buy structure that sits, and he now provides you some value in this starting line to go and beef up that forward line with the big dogs available. Beef up and get the best of the best, because we'll talk about some of these best options through the year. How much did you find yourself chasing a McRae, chasing an Oliver, chasing a Mitchell, chasing a Steele during the year and going, I just can never afford these big guys? Well, the best way to afford them is to start with them. He'll give you those. So for me, you put all those ingredients of the pie together, and there's a world where Reilly O'Brien can be the perfect solution for your starting squad. That's why for me, he's the perfect candidate to kick off the 50 most relevant, because at worst, he holds and he won't really hurt. At best, man, he can set you up for success for some real aggressive moves during the 2022 season.
MJ, we can't get out of here without doing draft either, can we?
No, we can't.
We never can. And I think this is where it is super, super fascinating, because if you're in a single season, it's obviously a lot more straightforward. You're really just going to see how many teams do you have. The more teams you've got, obviously the greater value the rucks have, with how it sort of falls away after that top maybe 10, 12. Once you sort of get past that, there's some teams that ruck share so much that it can be hard to be a scorer. I think back to, when a name Consoldo was literally playing 50-50 game time each, hard to be a big scorer. But again, I think he's the type of guy that you're drafting with your 95 mids, you're drafting with your 85 sort of forwards and backs, that type of range. I wouldn't be reaching much more, because I think there is a few ruck options you can maybe get a bit later that might be good value.
Yeah.
But I think he's a solid guy that will appeal to a lot of people because of safety.
Yeah.
When you're talking about the 95 guys, now you're probably talking, you'll go earlier than this just by the scarcity of the position. But for me, I'd be looking, if we're in a 10-team league, he's probably around, the 70 mark. You got a lot of, or maybe even 60 mark. You've got a lot of good,
sixth round. Yeah.
Yeah, just by the position. It's not so much a knock on him. It's just that there is going to be some guys, I think, that can get into the 80s, and I'd rather lock away that good mid or that really safe back or forward.
Yeah.
But he's going to be solid, isn't he? He's going to be a guy that, again, we always say he's not going to win. He's got more upside to win you the draft than a lot of his contemporaries. You think about your Nick Nats, your Goldsteins, and he doesn't have the burn of, say, a Darcy.
Yeah, the risk burn.
Even a Rowan Marshall.
Yep, of games.
Battling injuries like plantar fasciitis is something that does often reoccur. So he's got a bit of upside.
Yep.
Not much downside. So again, for me, he would be my third ruck. That's where I'd have him on the board.
Yeah.
So maybe I was a bit harsh saying 8. He probably is more in the top 50 just by that position. But again, you know what happens with rucks. They always seem to be, there's a bit of a surge in the 3rd and 4th just by their position.
Yeah.
But again, I think he's a pretty safe guy, and probably the guy that you hope a Darcy goes ahead of and it sort of falls in your lap would be really, really nice.
Yeah. Look,
what about you?
Yeah, it's going to be so interesting to see how people structure that out. Do they go all in on the Darcy hype of what he delivered last year? And in SuperCoach, I'd certainly pick Darcy ahead of Reilly O'Brien. Grundy's going to be the first ruck off the board across the formats. Gawn will still go early. I don't think he's going to, we might see a little bit of regression again, but still he's going to be right in the mix.
Imagine a forward status. That's something you've got to brace for in an ultimate footy and an AFL fantasy. If for any reason there is enough of a
Split.
a split. Like now we know the value of that. Even if he drops to a 90 with that forward status, he's super dangerous. So
Yeah.
Rob, that's not going to happen to Rob. So
No,
I think
it won't.
it's still the name. It's still gone. He's still one of the best players in the comp. Even
they'll be the first two rucks off the board, won't they? We just know they will be, and there's no problem with that.
Yeah.
Marshall will go early, so will Darcy, and then O'Brien, depending on the format you play, will either be third, fourth, or fifth in that mix.
Yeah.
He's a top 5 ruck across the formats for me. I know Nick Nat might bump up into SuperCoach scoring formats a little bit higher, but he'll be among the first handful of rucks off the board. And I suspect Grundy is a first-round pick again this year in many, many leagues. Gawn won't be far off that. And then it's all about the ruck run. It's all then about the structure and then how do people react to when ruck 3, ruck 4 go off the board. Where he's in a keeper league, I still think Grundy's the number 1 ruck to own in a keeper league. Then for some, Gawn will go early because they want the now. Others will go, no, I'll go Marshall or Darcy because they've got a felt greater upside. But again, O'Brien is a top 5 ruck and a top 50 pick in a brand new keeper league for me. He's got all the abilities.
Yeah, definitely more valuable in the keeper format, just because, again, you can play your Stanleys and your Kickies, and it's just sort of a single season. Yep, fine, fix it up. But again, to not have the headache, just again, you got to think 26 isn't. Like, you look at some of the stats of what Gawn's doing in his 30s.
Yeah, Gawn picked up at 25 is when Gawn really popped.
So
yeah.
We have to think of it, usually mids it's 27, you're starting to tail off your best.
Yeah.
Rucks it is often 30. And especially when you think about O'Brien, while he was playing at the lower level for a little bit of time, he hasn't had that grueling AFL schedule with a lot of travel baked in. He's only in his 3rd full-time. He's only played 3 full seasons. So 26 isn't old. That probably is more your 23 for a mid equivalent.
Yeah.
You should have 4 or 5.
He's hitting his prime now. I agree.
Yeah, exactly.
He's a ripping option, as we said, right throughout, regardless of the format you play. Rob is a candidate to seriously consider, and how the preseason unfolds, both for him and the other rucks around us, will really inform what we should do with him in 2022. But do you agree or do you disagree with us? The good news is you can get involved with us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. You can have your comments and have your say about what you think about Reilly O'Brien. And you can also jump on board and get this podcast 24 hours early by becoming a Patreon supporter of the Coaches Panel. For just a couple of bucks a month, you can get access to exclusive content, articles, podcasts, extra and additional community groups that are not open to the public, but Patreons get it. And there are certain tiers that get these podcasts 24 hours early. So as you're sitting there back on January 1 right now, it is New Year's Day, and you're regretting all your bad life choices of yesterday. No, I'm just joking. Of course you weren't doing that. Our 50 most relevant Patreons, they're already at 49. Someone's already a day ahead of you. So jump on board. All the links for that are at coachespanel.tv. It's where you can read my article on Reilly O'Brien as well. What a ripping player to kick off the 50 most relevant. I hope you've enjoyed it, Kane. You've been a superstar as always, my friend.
Thank you, MJ.
And that is us done. We will be back with you in 24 hours as we get into the number 49 player of the 50 most relevant. Do we need to do clues, Kane? Should I go back to doing clues?
I reckon people like the clues.
Okay.
Do you have one?
I can do one.
Yeah, go.
He was one of the most relevant and highest performing players in his line in 2021. But I suspect his ownership will absolutely plummet. But his scoring is not
sub 3%.
His scoring is not going anywhere, but his ownership is only going down. That's good news for those that want to jump on this player. Who is he? Our Patreons already know. But you, unless you jump on that Patreon group, won't find out till tomorrow.